Hi, everyone. It's great to be back. And we had, I think something like 300 people sign up for this topic and to hear Samantha. So as I said to her in the warm up, either she's a rock star or this topic is a topic of great interest or perhaps a little bit of both. So let's get right into it. I always like to start a little bit on the personal side. And Samantha, you used to work at the World Bank, and I haven't shared this with you, but when I first worked at Morgan in the first 3 or 4 years, the then chairman, CEO was a guy named Lou Preston, and he went on to run the World Bank. And so early in my career, I had this idea that that was the path that I would want to follow, is to take over JP Morgan, establish my credibility, and then go run the World Bank to save the world. And you worked at the World Bank and perhaps concluded that that wasn't going to be the way to save the world. So I'm just curious if you can give us a quick snippet of your experience there and why you chose to move out of that institutional setting.
Yeah, thank you, John. Really excited to be here with you today and with all these friends, many friends that I took your regenerative economics course with. And indeed, your message has always resonated with me so deeply, I think, because we were both on these kind of more traditional paths, or in my case, trying to change systems from inside those systems, and eventually decided to leave and kind of tell our story and share our insight, having walked in two different worlds, into what are the approaches we can take to compost this destructive, extractive economy that we are living in and support the transition to birthing a regenerative economy. And I spent 7 years in DC, 5.5 years at the World Bank. I'm trained as an economist. I did both my undergraduate and graduate studies in economics, kind of traditional neoclassical economics, but have been asking this question for my entire career almost, of how do we change where money is flowing so that it supports life, whether that's supporting the poorest and most vulnerable people in the world, or supporting the protection of the rainforest in Southeast Asia that I fell in love with very early in my career, that I witnessed burning and the deforestation of that forest there. And that question did take me to the World Bank. I wanted to understand how money flowed, how economies were structured, how financial systems were built, how they are reformed. And I felt like if I made this argument to the people that are running national economies, that destroying the biosphere would also destroy their economies, that they would change the structure of their economies. And that's what most of my research at the World Bank focused on. And, of course, there are lots of amazing people that work at the World Bank and the IMF who share, a lot of our views about the destructive nature of our current systems and the unsustainable kind of debt apparatus that is underpinning our global economy right now. And after publishing some papers on that and, seeing little bits of progress or impact based on my research, I decided that the real change I wanted to see, the kind of revolutionary catalytic change that Rising Appalachia was speaking to in our opening song, wasn't going to happen from within the system, and that we needed to shift decision-making power and financial resource governance to people living in relationship with place. And that's where this idea for my book and the BioFi project were born.
Beautiful. Yeah, the emphasis on governance comes out very strongly in your book, and I must say right off the top here. I've had the pleasure of reading it, not literally word for word, but pretty carefully. And I have to say, you did a really terrific job. It's a professional, highly, researched and well documented, in a sense, how-to book of this vision you have. And so I want to congratulate you and your co-authors and collaborators on it. And I loved seeing such a shared vision of what where we first started thinking about how to put this regenerative economy into practice was around the idea of regenerative communities. And as you know, we back in I think 2018 launched the Regenerative Communities Network. So we're very aligned on our thinking, but I must say you've taken that shared vision to a much more sophisticated and professional level of how to actually operationalize this. And so I want to congratulate you. And maybe I'd start by reading the last sentence of the executive summary, which I love. There is an order to the changes now emerging from the disorder of our current social and economic systems. There is an order to the changes now emerging from the disorder of our current and social and economic systems. Capital is finding its way to flow back to life and the humans stewarding it. And one of the very hopeful things about the book is that you're actually documenting something that is already happening. And a bioregional financing facility is a piece of institutional structure to massively accelerate what's already happening. And I have to tell you, in fact, I noticed my colleague Susan Artarian is on here, and she is the visionary behind all the storytelling we did in the early phase of Capital Institute, and she would attest that in her storytelling, she would meet people with this sort of conceptual framework of a regenerative economy, and they would literally say to her, "Oh yeah, that's what we're doing." And so it was very reinforcing to us that this was not like some new idea that had to be sold. It was actually documenting what's already happening, even though it's visible to most. And I'm curious if that's how you see it.
Absolutely. And there's a quote we included in the book from the 1970s, I believe, maybe Raymond Berg or someone from the Planet Drum Foundation that said, bioregionalism is just naming what's already happening. And Salmon Nation, one of the bioregional initiatives that we include a case study of in the book, talks about how their work is weaving and connecting the people working at the edge of systems of power and just bringing them together. And absolutely, that's what we try to do in the book, is to highlight how there are financial institutions, a handful, but bioregional organizing initiatives who are already trying to do this work. And what bioregional financing facilities do is bring more financial resources to the work that's already happening that, in my view, is really under-resourced, particularly for how urgent I believe it is. So our lands and waters are being stewarded by so many people around the world that aren't, getting compensated enough for the work that they do, and they're not able to deepen and scale up their work. And as I left the World Bank and moved into this work of nature finance that was closer to what was happening on the ground, I was hearing again and again from people with the most beautiful, impactful projects that they weren't able to get the resources they needed to support their work, and have spent years looking at carbon markets and other ecosystem services markets, and those weren't doing the trick to support regeneration either. And so bioregional financing facilities are essentially a way to connect these mycelial webs of regeneration around the world with very very centralized pools of capital and to create legibility of those regeneration efforts to capital that often doesn't know how to interact with those projects, by creating these kind of synergistic, systems designed portfolios of projects.
And as you wrote in the book, the next big thing in finance is a lot of little things, and it's messy work, and on the ground it'll all feel unique to that specific project, and yet from 30,000 feet you're seeing common patterns and needs, and so again, I just really applaud the vision you have. But before we dive down into the specifics, let me just ask you, for your 25-year vision on this, maybe even 50-year vision. Today, as you know, we live in a global economy, and it's driven by capital that, whether it's, I'll say mean or nice, its design is to optimize financial return on capital. And as its primary purpose, and we've created a system that massively incentivizes the flow of that capital to do just that at the expense of other values. But let's assume for a second it's not evil or malicious. It's just the design that we've created. And so here, your work, our work, is to in a sense, shift the dam or shift the river flow to percolate back into bioregions. But the bioregions are still participants in this global economy, where the dominant flow of capital is for the foreseeable future still driven by what I call the finance algorithm. And I'm curious, and we've never spoken about this. What's your vision on how these two forces will work their way out into the future?
Yeah, thank you, John. On one hand, it's a very beautiful, optimistic vision. And on the other hand, it's a response to what I view is increasing levels of social and ecological collapse that feel inevitable in the current systems that we're in. So it's a really bright vision, and then it's also kind of a response to a lot of darkness that I see and feel on the horizon. So with the beautiful vision, it's really tapping into all of the amazing regenerative work happening around the world, and people's increasing disillusion with national governments and polarized politics and global corporations, global finance that has no connection, no relationship to their bioregions. There's a hunger for moving away from abstraction to what is more real and tangible and connected to place and community. And so the vision is that there is a pathway to culture deepening in places and an identification of what the values are in a given place, and a decision to create a value system in that place that aligns with the values. And I see this being developed through citizens' assemblies and town halls and rituals and ceremonies, and all the ways people are so hungry to come together with their neighbors, with their community members in their bioregion, and develop a vision that they all agree on, despite the differences that they think they may have. And in my view, it involves increased civic participation, but in opting out of the type of civic participation that many of us have been told is the only option, which is like voting every other year in the United States, at least, right? Or like that's all you need to do. And, these are your only two options and you need to choose between them. This vision that I have involves people really getting involved in governing their places and making decisions about how financial resources flow in those places. And as I see more natural disasters, climate impacts, social systems collapsing, I think there's going to be a need for more resilience being developed at a place-based level, and for even federal resources, particularly in the United States, to flow to place-based initiatives to respond to or prepare for disasters. So that's how I see power kind of shifting over time to these more place-based initiatives.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I would paint maybe a slightly more optimistic picture on it, or hopeful picture, which is that we can't predict where this collapse that's already begun is going to go. But no matter where it goes, bad to terrible to not so bad, this work will be essential. The regenerative paradigm will be essential to rebuild, regenerate from whatever baseline we go to. And it's obviously going to be different in different places. So to me, I see it as an essential skill set and way of being, and building an infrastructure to channel capital into this on a scale that few people have even begun to imagine is really important work. So again, I applaud you. And I also just want to make it clear, this is not just a book. There's actually an organization that's been launched and funded that you're leading. So a BFF actually exists in the world, at least one does. And I suspect you would argue many of them already exist as well. Well, let's dive into the specifics. So I remember there's 12 attributes to a bioregional financing facility, and maybe give us a taste of some of those, maybe not all 12 of them, but just help us understand, what is a bioregional financing facility?
Yeah, and I would say no BFFs exist yet. So the BioFi project is this new organization that I am co-founding with my colleague Edward West, who's also worked a lot on Salmon Nation, very close to a BFF. And we are a collective.
By the way, Spencer Beebe is going to be with us next month. So
amazing! I'll definitely tune in
for everyone listening.
We'll
have probably the guy who's been thinking about this kind of work longer than anybody that I know, and the visionary behind Salmon Nation and many other organizations. He'll be with us to get very tangible next week or next month. So anyway, sorry.
Yeah, no, that'll be an excellent session. So the BioFi project is an organization that we started to support bioregional organizing teams that want to design, build, and implement bioregional financing facilities to do so. So we have some grant capital that's going to enable us to work with a couple of bioregions to design pilots and kind of demonstrate how these can be created, what types of funders or investors are interested in investing in these facilities, how you identify projects in your bioregion to fund initially, and also how things like eco credits or nature-based currencies can support the transition to regenerative economies. So Edward and I and our team of 10 colleagues are currently taking expressions of interest from bioregions interested in working with us to design those first couple of pilots. And we'll choose a couple to work with initially. And then the plan in year 2 is to develop a course course to take many different bioregions from around the world through the process of designing their own bioregional financing facility. So we're going to kind of do it ourselves first, and then take the learnings from that and launch a course in year 2 where bioregions can design that in real time and we can walk them through it. So yeah, I'm really excited to see a couple of these come to life. I've been writing for the past 9 months, and it's been very intense and exhausting. And in many ways, the real work is just beginning because now we're beginning the
Be careful what you
process.
ask for, or whatever that expression is.
Yeah, we're the dog that caught the car.
So, but you're not going to become a BFF.
No.
You're going to become the catalyst for BFFs.
Exactly why I chose that song to open us up today. But I'd love to take you through the 3 objectives and then some of the attributes of BFFs to give the audience a taste if they haven't had a chance to read the book yet. So the first objective of a bioregional financing facility is that they decentralize financial resource governance. So, this was kind of my clearest takeaway from life at the World Bank and the world of multilateral environmental funds is that if you centralize funding, it's not going to be deployed or allocated in a very efficient way. You need to give that money to people living in relationship with place that are organizing within their place and let them decide what their regenerative projects and priorities are. The second objective is that bioregional financing facilities organize synergistic portfolios of projects. So through my work with a private equity fund focused on investing in nature projects, I realized from the capital perspective, this is a really missing piece of the puzzle. You have these very small projects that, investors aren't able to reach with their resources. So you need people in place to organize these portfolios of projects that have what Buckminster Fuller would call cascading benefits, right? Where the sum becomes greater than its parts. And so this is the second thing that BFFs can do is bring people together to create portfolios of projects and organizations that really shift levers within systems. And then the third objective of BFFs is to catalyze the transition to a regenerative economy. So this is kind of the litmus test of are you doing what is needed to create a shift to a bioregional, more place-based, more sovereign, self-determined economy that is mostly dependent on the resources within that bioregion. And, you can trade with other bioregions from a place of sovereignty, but it's really moving out of this global monoculture capitalist economy with very fragile supply chains where, so many things that we consume, are dependent on resources and companies from around the world. And I see those supply chains becoming more and more brittle as we move into greater ecological destabilization. So those are the objectives of BFFs. And then I'll walk you through just a few of the attributes, and then you can ask me some questions, John. So the first is they should aim to align with living systems principles and indigenous wisdom. And for those of you that have taken John's course, this is one of the 8 principles of the Capital Institute is that regenerative economies need to align with living systems principles. And this is first and foremost for me too. And indigenous wisdom, that must be place-based in my view. So it's really, involves going to the indigenous elders in a particular place, or maybe that have been displaced from where you are, but have a historical relationship with stewarding that place and asking about their wisdom for taking care of that place and how it can inform the design of the economy there. The second is that BFFs serve the realization of a bioregional regeneration strategy. So this is a 20 to 100, maybe even 7-generation-year strategy for what the bioregion will look like over time. And so this brings in a really long-term view into how the capital is deployed, very different than most of our financial institutions today. The third is that they implement an inclusive and participatory governance structure that represents the bioregion. So again, very different than the financial institutions we know. I'll just name a couple more. They work to shift power imbalances. They treat growth and returns as a means, but not an end. They raise from mission-aligned funders and investors rather than trying to fit into the existing financial system. They find capital that shares the vision of regenerating that place. They apply an integrated approach to sensing and MRV, so all the cool technological quantitative stuff, but also indigenous ways of sensing what is happening in a bioregion and leveraging of citizen science. They invest in storytelling, and they engage in partnerships, place-based citizen stewardship, and the community of practice that the BioFi project is launching.
Beautiful. And you didn't just make up these 12 out of thin air. This is, I assume, what you observed from these early examples, as well as your own insights, or how did you land on these ideas? And by the way, all of them resonate very strongly with my thinking.
Well, yeah, I mean, some of them were inspired by your principles and by the course that I took with you. They were also, inspired by seeing what financing institutions that were working in this space were doing, but also what they weren't doing, where I saw gaps, where I thought they could be doing more. They were definitely inspired by my work to build nature-focused private equity funds, and where I saw us kind of struggling to really put capital in service to regeneration. And they were inspired by many Indigenous elders that I spoke to through the course of writing this book. Of course, time spent in the redwood forest and by the ocean, just listening to the living systems about how they work.
And one thing I like is you're not pretending that this flow of capital can happen, out of the conventional capital markets. There's a lot of effort to try to, finance nature using existing tools and putting a price on ecosystem services and da 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 da. And you're really just saying that ain't going to happen, and this is capital seeking a different purpose. In our conventional way of thinking of it, yes, there may be some business enterprises that can get funded and generate financial returns, but this is largely about recycling financial capital back into non-financial vitality. And I'm increasingly using the expression composting capital. And I heard you say composting. Yeah. I think you said composting the economy, but this is sort of saying it like it is. We actually need to compost capital into other forms of value. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah. Yes, we say that explicitly in the book, that bioregional financing facilities can serve as membranes between the economy that we have today and the bioregional regenerative economies of the future, and can interact with that old world and compost capital from that old world and put it in service to life, to people stewarding our ecosystems and to those ecosystems themselves. And yeah, I think it might be useful for me to talk through the 4 different types of bioregional financing facilities.
Yeah, before we get to that, let me just ask one more question on this sort of what kind of capital. Let's say you got a phone call after this conversation from a proverbial billionaire. Mm-hmm. And he or she says, Samantha, I'm really inspired. That's wonderful. And I have a few $1 billion and I'd like to actually invest in this. But I feel like if I put $1 billion into this, I deserve a seat at the table. So And in fact, I deserve a veto over some important things. And so I'm going to invest $1 billion in, I'm going to give it to you to tell me how to invest. And I want to invest it in 5 bioregions. And I want to invest in land that will then be regenerated, however you and all your genius friends get together and decide. But I'd like to continue to own that. And I'm not expecting any dividends, but I'd like to own it. What would you say?
Yeah, it's. I hope that happens, by the way. That would be great if any billionaires are out there listening. So we would welcome them to come and be a part, probably initially, of the community of practice that the BioFi project is stewarding, the BioFi community of practice, where regenerators, bioregional organizers, and capital providers can all come together and learn together about how to create bioregional financing facilities. And then as we are starting to build these prototype bioregional financing facilities, I think we would provide more. There's a beautiful hawk that just flew in front of the tree.
There's a sign.
Yeah, no, it does feel like a good sign. We would invite them to look at those bioregional financing facilities and think about whether they want to be engaged with them. And you'll see in the governance section of the book that we are not prescriptive on exactly what the governance structure for a bioregional financing facility looks like. It's going to be different in different places, but it does need to be working on shifting power imbalances and enabling empowered participation. And this billionaire sounds like they are maybe not quite ready to invest their money in a financial institution that has a governance structure that is doing those things. But I believe that if we bring them to the bioregion and enable them to participate in the citizens assembly or the town hall or the ceremony at the local watershed, we can start to cultivate their relationship with that place. Maybe they already have a relationship with that place. Maybe their capital has historically extracted from that place. Maybe their ancestors settled that place. And through that, they can see that bioregional financing facilities can help to compost their capital and support that capital to strengthen their relationship with that place and the relationships within that place again. So there's a lot of kind of storytelling and participation that is needed, I think, to get capital to let go of control the way that it might need to really participate in bioregional financing facilities. But also there are different bioregional financing facilities for different types of capital in the economy. So the first and kind of foundational one is the Bioregional Trust, which functions as a catalytic grant fund. So that involves, just full kind of trust-based philanthropy, maybe, some minimal reporting, but that capital will not be able to generate a financial return. It will generate the other 3 types of returns that we talk about in the paper: inspiration returns, social returns, and ecological returns. And the Bioregional Trust invests in developing organizations and projects within the bioregion so that they are then able to take return-seeking capital at a later stage. So the second bioregional financing facility is a venture studio.
Let me interject one thing. When I first learned about common lands for returns, I didn't kind of get it. Like, inspiration returns sounded a little bit, Yeah. And yet, in my experience, the motivation for people to shift their worldview and shift how they think about their values and their capital will have to be an inspiration, as in, breathing in spirit is, I believe, the root of inspiration. And so there's a spiritual dimension to this work, and I don't hold out a lot of hope that we do what we need to do without that inspiration. So I just wanted, if this 4 returns is new to people, I think the first time we all hear it, it seems a little soft. And at least in my opinion, it's become, I think, really important. So anyway, didn't mean to interrupt.
Thank you, John.
The next three types.
And in the Common Land for Returns framework, inspiration comes first. Willem and his team at Common Land really believe that that has to be first and foremost. And economic and financial returns are kind of last in the cascade. So please check out that framework and John's discovery dialogue with Willem. That was just last month. So yes, that's the trust is the first bioregional financing facility. The second is the Bioregional Venture Studio, which incubates cohorts of entrepreneurs that are developing businesses that function in an ecosystemic way. So again, using, kind of the Bucky Fuller approach of creating synergistic portfolios that can create cascading benefits or trim tabs within the economy. And then that creates deal flow or investment opportunities for the third bioregional financing facility, which is the Bioregional Investment Company. And the Bioregional Investment Company can generate financial returns through what we call, systemic investment funds that it will create. And those returns, might be quite a bit lower than what most nature-based investors are seeking right now. Most of the investors that I talk to are looking for high-end double-digit returns. And how we approach returns in bioregional finance in the book is that we recommend that the management team of the Bioregional Investment Company map out the organizations that are priority in the bioregion to support the implementation of the bioregional regeneration strategy, and then do some mapping and financial modeling to figure out what types of returns those organizations can generate and be regenerative organizations and pay their employees well and, continue to be good citizens in the bioregion and not extract, and then develop term sheets based on those returns and find investors that are aligned with those returns and that vision. So it's quite a new way of investing. And the Bioregional Investment Company can also develop and issue bioregional regeneration bonds to pay for larger scale projects. Dam removal on rivers is one that we use as an example. But it could also be, kind of larger infrastructure, regenerative infrastructure projects. And then the fourth and final bioregional financing facility for now is the Bioregional Bank, which can operate similar to what we in the US call a CDFI, a community development financial institution. It can provide low interest loans to regenerative organizations, technical assistance, lines of credit. It can provide retail banking services to citizens in the bioregion. And one thing that we hope it can do is to develop and issue nature-based currencies. So, this hasn't been done before by an institution like a bank, and it's something that I'm really excited to work on with some collaborators. And one of the financial institutions that we profile in a case study in the book that is doing a lot of what a bioregional bank would do is in indigenous CDFI based in Alaska called Spruce Root. So that's worth looking at. So those are the four types of bioregional financing facilities. I've gotten requests to design a bioregional insurance company. So maybe that is to come in the future.
I just maybe want to kind of again reiterate that your approach is, in a sense, the reciprocal of what the mainstream sustainability movement has tried to do for 20 years, which is to think about externalities, put a price on externalities, bring them back into the market system so that investors can generate the kinds of returns by monetizing the externalities through carbon credits or whatever else, and keep the machine going. And you're literally flipping it on its head and saying, no, the capital actually needs to flow to where we need the capital to flow. And the returns that that'll generate are the returns that that'll generate.
Yep.
And it's really that simple. And this sort of expectation or desire to, generate the returns that the BlackRocks of the world expect, that baseline, and or even ESG funds that are going to mimic the S&P 500, when the whole mainstream economy is extractive and degenerative, makes absolutely no intellectual sense, much less common sense.
It's a losing game. And I would argue that we don't have any other choice right now, John, than to hand over resources to people that know how to regenerate a place, and to trust them, and to trust that that is a good investment. And I think there are more and more of what I call Shambhala warriors within these big institutions that want to try something different. Like maybe they're not fully bought in to, allocate their whole portfolio to that type of investing, but they are frustrated with the options that they have with, carbon markets being the only way they can support regeneration, through their balance sheet. And they want to try something different. And I would encourage everyone that's here today to flip to the section of the paper in chapter 4, where we lay out in a table all of the different types of capital that we believe could invest in bioregional financing facilities. And then there's a column that I wrote as to what the rationale might be for each of those forms of capital to engage in bioregional financing facilities. And that's, of course, very speculative. And I think also we just need to tell stories about, why this is important, and then try those stories on and see how it works.
Beautiful.